Hi there, my name is Andy Farquharson and I'm your host on Alternative Exit,
the podcast dedicated to educating small business owners about the possibilities, benefits and challenges of transitioning to an employee ownership model. Did you know that there are over 200 million SMEs around the globe with an owner that will be retiring within the next 10 years? Many of these owners will never actually find a buyer for their business, forcing them to close their doors, wreaking havoc on their employees and the communities. There is an alternative. This show will explore different forms of employee ownership and the best practices for a successful transition. Each episode is going to feature interviews with experts on employee ownership, business owners who've successfully made the transition, and consultants who've helped facilitate these changes.
Okay, now let's get on with the show.
Hello and welcome to the Alternative Exit. Today's guest is Tim Rettig. So he is the leader of an employee-owned business, or the CEO of Intrust IT, which is a 100% employee-owned tech firm, which he founded back in 1992. In 2019, Tim transitioned the company to an ESOP and set a bold goal to create 10,000 employees, owners in his lifetime, which is great, something that we both share. He's also the interim owner of Staff Nation, where he plans to transition the company to employee ownership too, continuing a family legacy which was started by his father. Another thing which I'm really excited to dig into with Tim today is his thoughts, because he's on open book management and ownership culture, because like Tim speaks openly about this on many other sort of presentations and podcasts. So Tim, welcome to the Alternative Exit.
Hey, thanks, Andy. And I am really excited to be here. And I hate to start off the interview by correcting you, but I have some things to correct in my mind. So we are currently at 30% ESOP.
30%.
We got a lot of other stuff done. We are. I am currently working on getting to 100% this year. So actually, I'm in due diligence right now with the next transaction, which we'll get into what all that means and how all that comes about. So, So I just wanted to correct that little piece there. Which, if people are listening to this in a few months, it will be 100% employee owned. So it'll change by then anyway. So.
We're working ahead of the schedule here. But no, thank you for that clarification. Look, that's something that, as we're sort of working through that transition, like those transitions, something I really want to talk about anyway. Like, how do you start? How does that change how you're shaping your role as a leader, like, as you're sort of going through what is a bit minority employee ownership towards that majority? I mean, it's got to shape how the organization's working.
Correct. And it's really neat that an ESOP structure is that flexible, that you can do 1% employee ownership or 99% employee ownership or 100% employee ownership, anywhere in between. So the flexibility is great. So that is one of the real benefits of employee owner or ESOP structure, but it's also one of the detriments is the fact that it is so complex because there are so many things you can do with it. So and we'll get into some of that, but kind of where this all came from for me is my father started a software company in 1978 in Ohio, and he operated that company and navigated it through Y2K. For those of you that were in the industry back in 99, that was a big deal. And they had his software it was a big deal. His software is accounting software for cities, local governments, municipalities. So Y2K was a big deal. He was under a ton of stress during that time to make sure their software wasn't going to crash on January 1st, 2000. And because of all that stress in 2000, he had a heart attack. And the doctor pretty much said it was caused by all the stress he was under. So he made the difficult decision that he wanted to exit his company and sell it at that time because he didn't think that he could disconnect himself from the business and be able to operate it and not be under that stress constantly. So he got a business broker and a business consultant, and then they put together an offer package and went out to market to sell his company. He got a couple of offers that he was weighing, trying to decide which one was going to make the most sense. Both of them from, one was from New York, one was from Toronto. And he was really concerned about the fact that his employees would they wouldn't lose their jobs, but if they wanted to keep their jobs, they were going to have to move maybe to another country. So it was difficult for him to make a decision. And his business consultant said, "Hey, I know this isn't what you're looking for, so have you considered an ESOP?" So he did some investigation and decided that is the model that he wanted. He wanted to be able to keep his employees employed in the small town where he built the business. He wanted to continue living there. So he chose to do an ESOP. It took him a couple years to get everything in place and actually implement the ESOP. And in that time, the company continued to grow and become more profitable. And he actually exited the company and had a better financial outcome through the ESOP than either of those offers that he had received previously. So not only was it better for him and his legacy and his peace of mind, but also financially was a better exit for him.
What drove that better exit for him? Was the fact that he, like, the operational improvements he needed to make to turn it into a successful employee-owned company just meant that the business was operating better and it was worth more? Or was that the crux of it? Okay.
Because his employees got more engaged, because they were going to keep the company. It actually improved in operations and got more profitable. And he also, because he did a seller note instead of going to get bank financing, he made the interest off the note that was required to have the trust buy the business. And then there was also some tax benefits to do an ESOP in the States. So putting all those things together, he had a better exit. So he stayed in that small town. He actually went back to school and became a deacon in the Catholic Church and still lives there today and is the deacon of the local parish. And he works 7 days a week now. He works on Sundays. So he works more now than he did 20 years ago, but it's not as stressful. And he gets more enjoyment out of what he does these days. So he is very happy with what he did there.
Yeah, very cool. Well, so you had a very strong understanding of employee ownership, like straight out of the gate, probably when you were entering business.
Yeah, I started my company in 92. So when he was trying to decide what he wanted to do, I was already operating my business for almost 10 years.
Yeah.
And he has 5 kids. I'm the oldest of 5. So, that's usually what happens is you've got a business owner and he sells it to or transitioned the company to his kids. But none of us were interested really in taking over the business. I had my own business that I was operating, and all my brothers and sisters, they were in their 20s. They weren't ready to take over the business from him in any fashion. So it wasn't a real good fit for us. So the fact that he did that, it was kind of, I wasn't involved in it day to day. It was something I would check in with him occasionally. So I didn't really see the nuts and bolts of how the ESOP was implemented from his standpoint. But I did see the people that I had grown up knowing, because I worked in his business in grade school and high school, doing odd jobs in that. So I knew a lot of the people there and got to see them then retire, keep their job when he did the employee ownership thing. And then when they retired, the fact that they were able to retire in a better position because they had this additional benefit of the ESOP.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so why, after you seeing like those elements of success, you waited until 2019. What was for your exit? What was the catalyst to make that change in 2019?
Sure. Yeah. So it happened quite a bit sooner than that in terms of the catalyst. So, my father went through his transaction. Like I said, I wasn't like really involved in it. Didn't know what had occurred. I just knew that he implemented employee ownership. But the catalyst for me is, my company's an IT company. So we do a lot of computer implementations and we do a lot for our clients. And I had my largest client at the time, this is 2007. They were about $1 billion a year company, private equity backed, and they were going around the US and they were buying manufacturing companies. And typically they would buy a company and they would allow it to operate independently for about a year. And then they slowly start folding in payroll and their accounting systems and that kind of stuff to headquarters here in Cincinnati. But they called me one day and they're like, "Hey, Tim, we're buying this company in Texas. Their systems are so outdated that we don't want to let them run. They're doing a lot of stuff on paper. Like, we want to put a new system in day one, pretty much the day after we close." So we put a plan together. They had a nearby facility. This is outside of Dallas. So we shipped all the equipment into Dallas. Myself and a couple of people from my team flew there, picked up all the equipment on a Thursday or Friday. They closed the sale of the acquisition on Friday afternoon and got the keys to the facility and everything. They met me there Friday evening to let me in. And they're like, you have all weekend to put in the new computers. And then Monday morning, when the employees come in, we're going to train them. We set up the conference room as a training center. So that's what we did. We worked all weekend, put all the systems in, got everything set up. And we were excited. We got there really early Monday morning. We thought we were going to be like Oprah Winfrey, like you get a new computer and you get a new computer. The computers they had in their office were terrible. I mean, they were old systems. So we put all new computers in. All the employees came in the door. And this was a corrugated pipe manufacturing facility. So it was like a 2-acre site where they had corrugated pipe being manufactured and stacked and inventoried and picked up with trucks and stuff. And in the center was this like small administrative office with like a dozen or so people working in it, doing sales and billing and everything. So we worked in that. But as the employees came into that building and we started talking to them, we realized that nobody had told them any of this was happening. They had no idea that they were getting new computers for sure, but they had no idea the company had sold on Friday. Like no
new owner.
The former owner hadn't told anybody, and there was nobody there to announce it. The company that I was working for, the people that were supposed to be there from HR to make the announcement and work with the employees got their flight canceled on Sunday, and they were flying in on Monday. They were then supposed to get there like in the afternoon, and they're like, "It's no big deal. That the employees already know this, so by time we'll just tell them when we get there, we'll tell them what's up." They had no idea. So we were like stuck in the middle of this. And we figured they were going to be asking us like, how do I log in? And how do I print to that printer? How's a scanner work? And they were like, do we have jobs? And what about our 401k and our health insurance? And who are these people that bought us? And like all kinds of crazy questions. And we were like, we're subcontractors. We don't even work there. So we don't know what the benefits look like. And, there's like 15 minutes of all this chaos and all these people around asking me all these questions. And then the plant foreman walked in because they had radios and they were telling people. So the plant foreman walked in, this big guy with muddy boots on from being out in the yard. And everybody stopped talking and looked at him. I'm like, oh, shit. And he's like, he comes in, he's like, where the fuck's Bob? And I was like, oh, shit. And Bob's the owner. And then everybody like looks around, doesn't say anything. Yeah. And so he says it again and he walks by all of us and he goes into Bob's office and all of Bob's stuff's gone. I had noticed on the weekend, like this office had all the pictures off the walls were gone and there was no personal things there or whatever. So he spins around, walks past us again, stops at the front door. And he's like, I'm going to Bob's house and find out what the fuck's going on. So he gets in his pickup truck and takes off. And we're all like, oh, wow. We're all waiting to hear what's going to happen. So, 20, 30 minutes go by and then he comes back in the door and he's like, hey, I went to Bob's house. Bob's not there. There's a moving truck there. They're packing up all his stuff. They won't tell me
out of town.
Yeah. They won't tell me where they're taking his stuff. So it was like, we're here. We're going to have to figure this out on our own because we don't know what's going on with Bob. So I was there that entire week sitting next to those people, showing them their new computers, but mostly hearing their stories of how long they'd worked there. This is like one of the biggest employers in this little town. A couple people had expected to be able to buy the company from Bob. And they're like, oh, there were all these people in doing inventory and looking at all the books. And Bob had told him it was the bank and he was going to get a loan to do some improvements. And he was not doing any of that. And to this day, I don't know if Bob was like embarrassed because the company was going to go under and he had to sell it, or if he was embarrassed because he had made all these promises to all these people over the years and then didn't, hold any of them up and left town and made a bunch of money. I don't know which one it is, but either way, I was like, I don't want my legacy to look like this at all.
Totally. But I mean, there are a lot of people who sound like I hear of lots of exit stories that are very similar.
Yeah. And that's the crazy thing about this. So, and I flew back on that plane and I was like, my dad, sold his company 5 years ago and like, he still lives in this town and like, he's still able to show his face. And like, I know some of those employees that still work there and like, they didn't have a mutiny. Like, what did he do differently? So, and I kind of knew that he did an ESOP, but I didn't know exactly how the mechanisms of it worked. So I came back and talked to him, and I was like, hey, what did you do? And, and I told him this whole story and everything. And he's like, yeah, that's not what he wanted to do. He was worried that that's what was going to happen to his company if he would have sold to one of these other companies. So from that, I was like, okay, I definitely want to do an ESOP when I exit. But at that time, I'm in my 30s. I'm not ready to exit the company. I had a couple of partners that weren't interested either. They were all about my age as well. And we weren't profitable enough to be able to do an ESOP. So I kind of put it on the back burner. And then 2012, I wound up buying both my partners out. And that's when I said, and I pivoted the company and I said, I'm going to focus on the cloud and cybersecurity. This is 2012. And I also told my employees that at that time, I said, my goal is to become an ESOP, 30% ESOP by 2020. And to do that, we need to be this size. We need to be this profitable. We need to pay off this debt that I incurred by buying these other partners out. And we put together an 8-year plan from 2012 to 2020 to become employee owned. And we exceeded all those goals in 2018. And then we became an ESOP in 2019, a year ahead of schedule. So that was kind of how I did that, which is unique. Most ESOPs don't get their employees involved years ahead of time and use, a lot of times they decide to do it and they wind up surprising the employees rather than getting them involved ahead of schedule. But I found it very beneficial to have them pulling with me to work through. So, and you had brought up employee ownership. Oh, go ahead.
It's a long way to pull them through, though.
Yeah.
It said pulling them through for an 8-year journey for 30% of the company. I mean,
Yeah.
what was for some people, they might go, well, is that carrot big enough for me to pull through on this type of long journey? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, good point. And even then, when it becomes 30% owned, it's not like all of a sudden they get a windfall of cash. They just get some shares in the company, and they're still, further out when they're going to, realize it.
Retire to get them.
Yeah. So a couple of things came up there. So I talked to my father and I was like, hey, what would you have done differently when you did your ESOP? He's like, well, I would have got my employees involved in the finances before I became an ESOP instead of after. So he's like, they had no visibility into any of the finances. We did the ESOP. Then all of a sudden we're starting to give them financial reports and they don't understand any of them. So I had read Great Game of Business by Jack Stack years prior. Yeah, great. And I was like, oh, that's what I need to do. So I wound up implementing Great Game of Business. And in Great Game of Business, there's a quarterly bonus program. So that is near-term benefit. So the employees could not only see that, okay, we're working towards these bigger goals, but on the quarterly basis, we're getting a bonus for the profitability of the company. So those two things together, there are people more incentivized, the younger people more incentivized to the near-term quarterly bonus. And then the people that are thinking ahead to retirement that might be in their 40s and looking forward, they're like, oh, I also like this ESOP thing. So it definitely got everybody pulling together in the same direction to improve the company.
Okay. So when you think about, there's something you mentioned there right at the start, like you started sharing your books, but people didn't know what they were looking at, right? So how did you make that, how much education did you have to do, A, for your employees, and B, how much adapting of your books did you need to do to make it meaningful for the employees?
Yeah, that's a good point, because I didn't want to just be open book reporting, because then all you're doing is giving them a report at the end of the quarter or month or whatever. And they don't understand what is on it, and they don't understand how they can affect what's on that report. So Great Game of Business, there's two big components, which is know the rules, which is educate your employees, and have scoreboards. So that's two things that we did. So around know the rules, I had attended a financial literacy class years prior in like the 90s. And the way this class worked, it was a day long, and you would go in and you would run a pretend lemonade stand like you were a little kid. And like in the story, like go to your parents and borrow $5. So now you have $5. So we're going to take a piece of paper, put a line down the middle. And on the right-hand side, we're going to write what we owe, $5 to our parents. And then on the left-hand side, what we have, which is $5 of cash. That's your first balance sheet. The left side has to equal the right side. So this class walks you through exactly how you run a lemonade stand and cost of goods sold and depreciating. If we're going to paint the roof, that's a maintenance item. But if we put a new sink in, we're going to depreciate that in our lemonade stand. And then you get to the point where your lemonade stand is doing so well that you're a consultant for other lemonade stands. So your labor costs now move into cost of goods sold because you're now selling your lemonade stand,
Your time.
time. So it changes that. Yeah. It's a fascinating class that I had taken, and it's been turned into a workbook that you can buy on Amazon. It's called The Accounting Game.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a $20 book. So what we do to this day, we've looked at some other ones. We've tried some other ones. So now we've been doing the Great Game of Business now for 11 years. To this day, we still use that book, and we've turned it into a 8-week class, 1 hour a week for 8 weeks. So it's 8 hours total. So it's just like the whole day, but we spread it out.
Yeah.
And they have homework they do in the middle. So every single employee that comes in the door, they go through that 8-hour class so that they are proficient in financial literacy for businesses. So, yeah.
I think even in the Great Game of Business, they talk about sort of giving the employees a little bit of respect. I mean, they manage their home budgets, so why can't they be a part of managing here? So, exactly. And I love that book. I just sort of looked it up there. It looks fantastic. Yeah. I mean, if we want to go back to one of those other principles from the Great Game, like you talked about sort of you want to be able to keep score. How did you adjust your books to help people understand how they could individually contribute to the performance of the business?
Yeah, we started off really at the high level, and we had maybe on a weekly basis, we would forecast different things like what we think we're going to complete for projects for the month, what we think we're going to sell. So we're forecasting towards the end of the month what costs we think we're going to have around overtime, some things that they can control. And we had big things. They're like 12 items that we and as the company grew, we started splitting that out. People bring questions up. They'd be like, how much are we spending on advertising with Google AdWords and radio and all that kind of stuff? So, we had a line item that was just called sales and marketing. And we're like, all right, we're going to split advertising out of that. So, and we'll start having somebody from the sales and marketing group forecast that number so you can see what that is. So over time, not everybody, we have 70 employees, so we don't have everybody in the company, but about half the employees at this point have a line item on the P&L that they forecast every single week. So we have a 10-minute huddle. So we have a 10-minute huddle every single morning at 8:45, where everybody in the company gets on and talk about what's going on for the day. Everybody. Any cybersecurity issues that people need to be aware of, outages, whose birthday it is, just any good news, just all that kind of stuff. It's really quick, 10 minutes. But on Tuesdays, it's about 15 minutes because we have an extra 5 minutes at the end where all the people that have those numbers forecast. They just say, what's our projected project revenue for the month? And that person tells his number. What's our expense number? What's our advertising number? They forecast all those numbers in. So by the end of that huddle, I have a pretty good idea what the end of the month is going to look like because everybody's forecasting the numbers, and the people that are forecasting have some visibility into those numbers. Contrast that to a typical business owner. The books close a week or 2 or 3 or 4 weeks after the close of the month, and they find out, at the end of May, what April looked like. Not me, it's May right now. I know what, and it's we're only a week into May. I know what the end of this month probably going to look like because I've got that forecast that's already been put together this past Tuesday.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's. I think you're very generous in saying sort of a lot of business owners aren't going to know, will know at the end of the month. Most of them won't even know till a couple of months at the end of the quarter. That's just sort of how things went. Yeah. And it changes your ability to be able to manage when you're looking forward, which is awesome. So I want to go back to that correction you made at the start with regards to you're currently at 30%. With 30% ownership. And it's interesting, when you hear about the team at say ownership lens investing, transform finance, they talk about sort of 30% being the sort of the minimum viable employee owned number. How did you get to the 30% as that being the number that you wanted?
So the reason I chose that number is because in the US to do what's called a 1042 exchange, where you can not have to pay capital gains taxes, you have to do 30% minimum. So That's why I set that goal. There are plenty of ESOPs out there where they're 5% or 10% because they don't do a 1042, and they're just giving a 1% or 5% a year. But I went right to 30% so that I could do that 1042 exchange.
Okay,
And
makes sense.
yeah, and people aren't familiar with that 1042. Usually they're familiar with the 1031 exchange where if you got a piece of real estate where you've got a large gain in it, you can then go buy another building. And if you've got a $500,000 gain in one building, you can roll that into another building so that you don't have to pay the gain before you buy your next building. It's very similar where you can sell a private company to an ESOP in the States, and then the money you take from that, then you can turn around and you can buy what they call qualified replacement property, QRP, which would be money or stock or bonds in other US-based companies. That's how that works.
And so as you're thinking about this transition, because you talked about sort of the desire to get to 100% ESOP, how are you thinking about what's going to change culturally in your business as you move to the 100%?
Yeah, so a couple of things. And one of the other reason I went to 30%, I was looking at doing acquisitions, and I didn't want to put too much debt on the company that would make it difficult to do acquisitions. I also had a couple of kids at home that were in grade school, and I'm like, they may be interested in operating the business in the future, so they could buy it for me. So I didn't want to do 100%. So a couple of reasons I didn't want to do 100%. Now my kids are in college. Neither of them are interested in the business at all. They were doing their own thing. So that's one of the reasons I want to go to 100%. And yeah, once I cross over and have a majority ESOP, at that point, it's kind of like a public company where I have to have an external board that I report to. That external board sets my pay. They can fire me, and they also identify my replacement. So they help with succession planning, which I want help with. So the recommendation is that I don't choose my successor, that the board chooses my successor and deals with that. So yeah, it does change that. Now, one of the things we did differently for our board that you don't have to do, but 2 employees internally are elected onto the board. So we have one manager, so one salaried person that's elected.
Your board today?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you've sort of got that functioning like it will, like when it's a majority-owned ESOP. Is that right? So you're trying, you're having that.
Board. It's a board of advisors right now, so they don't have any skin in the. They don't have the ability to fire me or anything because it's a minority. I'm getting things ready. So that board has been meeting now for 7 or 8 months as they kind of get used to what we're going to talk about, what things are going to look like. And then also, in addition to those 2 internal people, there'll be 2 external people that are not on the board yet. So those 2 internal people are helping me select 2 external people. So when it's all said and done, we become majority ESOP. There'll be 5 people on the board, 2 internal employees, 2 external people, and then myself. So there'll be the 5 people that would be there.
Okay, very exciting. Well, so I love how you're starting that journey anyway. Even though they don't have the governance, like that ability to be able to make those decisions, you're at least sort of having them there, so they're educated on what it feels like to be operating as a board.
Yeah, and it's funny because I tell them, like when we had our first meeting, I was like, usually the first thing a board gets is all the financial information that none of the employees get. I said, but we're a completely open book, so you guys already know all the financial information. So there's nothing that's hidden. It's all fully transparent. So there's not much for me to bring to you to show you financially because you already see everything. So it's a little different for sure.
Okay, so let's think about. You've got this open book management, which is awesome. You've got your daily stand-ups where people are asking questions, and like the Tuesday morning meetings where you're going a little bit deeper in the data. How are you getting your team involved in the decision-making today? And also, how are you getting them involved in the future-looking strategy?
Yeah, great question. So in addition to Great Game of Business, we also use EOS or Traction, Entrepreneur Operating System. So we've been using that for 4 or 5 years now. And that allows us through, the weekly meetings that you have as your team. So it's not a whole company meeting because that wouldn't be very productive. We do have a monthly full meeting where it's usually 45 minutes to an hour long, where we go over all the finances and all the departments report in, and then we have an Ask Me Anything. But on a weekly basis, those departments all meet. They use the L10. Level 10 meeting structure that EOS has, where they can all bring their issues in and get them solved. We have quarterly rock setting strategy meetings that all
Mm-hmm.
those departments and teams use to set what their strategic rocks are going to be for the quarter. So, and then we have a yearly, the leadership team has a 2-day kind of retreat that we go on for setting the more long-term vision of the company and strategy that we bring back and then go over with those individual teams.
Okay, and so it sounds like there's an element of, like, when it comes about that sort of rock creation, there is an element of bottoms up where, like, you've got your department heads who are sort of working with the team to figure out what they are, and then it comes up to the top, like it comes up to the management team where you'll use that to define your strategy. When you After you've defined your strategy, when you go back, is it more, hey, look, we're just going to inform you, or are you consulting them and saying, hey guys, like, what are the gaps in this strategy? Like, when you're going back and sharing it with everyone.
So we use components of Great Game of Business High Involvement Planning. So the way that works is we identify a critical number every year, like what's the one thing we're going to focus on for next year, and what are our sales numbers going to look like, and how's our hiring, what is our hiring strategy for next year. We communicate all that information in a meeting at the end of the year, before the end of the year. And then as part of that, right after we have that whole meeting that we go over all that information with them, we put a survey out to all the employees that asks them, do you agree that these numbers are too aggressive, not aggressive enough, or just right? Do you, are you on board with what the sales goals are? Are you on board with what our critical number is? Do you think these things are attainable? What weaknesses do you think that we have in our plan? What strengths do you have in our plan? Any other things. So we collect all that information and use that to maybe make some small changes and tweaks to the plan. If it came back and majority said it's too difficult or it's too easy, we would make changes. But so far, we've had like 90% agreement with what the plan is and where we're headed, which we're never going to get to consensus. But as long as we have the majority, we're comfortable with that.
What's been one of the most impactful suggestions or innovation that's come sort of from the team, from all these sort of opportunities that they've got to comment on the direction of the business?
Oh, geez, we get so many great ideas. So our security team has developed a solution. There's an issue called multi-factor authentication bypass, where when you log into your email and you put in, you get your text number you put in for multi-factor authentication, a cookie gets put onto your computer or your phone so that you don't have to do that every single time you check your email. Well, hackers have figured out a way to send you a specially crafted email that you click on and it steals that session token, that cookie, and then they're able to get right into your email. And it's becoming more and more common. We started seeing this about 3 years ago. So our team was able to come up with a solution, an AI-powered system on the back end to monitor all of our clients' email boxes for any unusual activity that would do that. And they've continued to refine that, and now they've got it down to it's able to identify unusual sign-in activity after 3 minutes. It revokes that session token. It requires the user to re-authenticate again. So it's a lot better than just locking their account and making them change their password, because it happens a lot quicker and it's not as intrusive. So they came up with that all on their own, and now we're turning it into a product that we're going to be able to go out and go to market with. So that's just an example that came out of one team that thought that was a great idea.
That's so good. I mean, it's such a great example of having the people closest to the problem, closest to the customer, coming up with the solutions. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, because at the leadership team level, we wouldn't have come up with that. They came up with it. Yeah.
Customer-driven development. It's the best products always come out that way. Look, Tim, I could keep talking about this stuff for days, but I want to be sort of mindful of your time. So we're going to sort of come to an end. I'm going to ask you a fast round of questions. We'll just ask you these 3 questions, and you offer a quick response. How does that sound?
Right. That sounds interesting. Okay. Sure, I'm up.
Who's the leader you most admire in employee ownership?
Oh, in employee ownership, that would probably be Jack Stack. Because of his, what he did and how he was able to navigate SRC through being an international harvester plant that was going to be closed, rallying the employees together, buying the plant, getting the loan, and then coming up with the great game of business. So he's probably the person I admire the most.
Yeah, it's such an amazing story. I love that. Which could also be a window to the answer of your next question, which is, what is your favorite resource on employee ownership?
There's so many good ones out there. Probably, so in terms of the organization, the National Center for Employee Ownership is probably the best organization I work with, because they don't just do ESOPs. They also do co-ops and employee ownership trusts, and they also have some international connections as well. The close runner-up is the ESOP Association, but they're solely focused on ESOPs. So NCEO, I think, wins because of that.
Okay, awesome. And last question, what would you say to a business owner who's sitting on the fence regarding a transition to employee ownership?
The first thing I would say is they can contact me, and I'd be more than happy to talk through, if they're a good candidate, what that means. But if they're in the States, then NCEO has about quarterly events called Is an ESOP Right for Me? The next one's coming up in July in San Diego. I'm one of the speakers. But it's a day and a half long, and it's all focused on, all the questions that come up and all the things you need to be aware of to become an ESOP. So it's in San Diego in July. In October and November, it's going to be in Baltimore. And then we're working actually on one in Ohio in the spring next year. So like I said, about every quarter, they move it all around the U.S. And it's the best place I've seen to learn about ESOPs.
Okay, very cool. So go do your homework with the NCEO.
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, Tim, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your great storytelling and helping us understand more, like sharing your journey and some of the amazing sort of tools and tactics that you deployed. I mean, if people want to reach out to you, like ask about your transition, other stories, how can people find you?
LinkedIn, they can find me. Tim Rettig is the easiest way to find me on LinkedIn. Also, timrettig.com, and there's links there to LinkedIn. Okay. I haven't updated much on that blog for quite some time, but that's one way to find me as well. So yeah, thanks, Andy.
Very cool. Well, I'll have links to that in the show notes. Also, you mentioned like the Great Game of Business, EOS, like a few of those elements. I'll put links to those as well. So if anyone wants to dig into those assets, you can do that too. But Tim, thank you so much for joining us on The Alternative Exit.
All right. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.
Cheers. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to continue learning about employee ownership as an alternative exit, head across to abettermonday.me for additional links and resources. You can also make sure to subscribe or follow along in your favorite podcast app, and be sure to leave us a 5-star review.